Flood in Alaska. Nature said no. A glacier cancels the Trump-Putin meeting. Now that's a real betrayal. Trump eases sanctions on Russia. Rare earth minerals for peace. What is Trump up to? I'll tell you all the details in a moment. Hello, this is Ukraine Today. I am Victoria Panchenko, and recent events. A major flood has begun in Alaska, where Trump plans to meet with Putin. Alaskans were warned about the natural disaster the day before. Even nature has decided to protest against the planned meeting between the presidents of the United States and Russia.
And now let's return to the most anticipated event of the week, the meeting in Alaska. Coincidentally, a state of emergency has been declared there due to the threat of a catastrophic flood. Floodwaters are expected to hit the regional capital, Juneau, in the coming days. Some residents of the city are already preparing to evacuate. All of this is due to a possible breach of a glacial lake in the Suicide Basin, which is part of the Mendenhall Glacier. Floods from this basin have become an annual problem since 2011. In recent years, they have destroyed houses and flooded hundreds of homes. Hydrological monitoring confirms that the water volume has reached or exceeded the levels observed during previous record floods. The release of water is expected at any moment, the governor of Alaska stated.
And now the record level of floodwaters released by the Mendenhall Glacier has reached the river that flows through Alaska's capital, Juneau. Authorities have reported the danger of flooding. Water has already accumulated on several streets and seeped under recently constructed barriers meant to protect homes along the riverbank. Some residents in the flood zone heeded the warnings and evacuated after water began to escape from beneath the glacier's ice dam. Blogger. The impressive Mendenhall Glacier is conveniently located approximately 19 kilometers, which is about 12 miles from the Alaskan capital city of Juneau, a community that has a population of around 30,000 residents. This city can only be reached by water or by plane. By the way, Trump announced serious consequences for Putin if he does not agree to stop the war after negotiations in Alaska. However, on the eve of the Trump-Putin meeting in Alaska, the U.S. temporarily eased sanctions pressure on Russia. The U.S. Treasury announced a temporary easing of sanctions restrictions regarding certain transactions with the Russian Federation as part of preparations for the meeting between the leaders of the two countries. Moreover, Trump admitted that he would not be able to persuade Putin to stop attacks on civilians in Ukraine.
Host, do you believe you can convince him not to attack civilians in Ukraine? Well, let me tell you this. I've already had that conversation with him. We've had many good talks, but then I see a missile hit a nursing home or an apartment building, and people are lying there dead. So, probably the answer is no, because I've already had that conversation.
However, the U.S. president suggested that Zelensky discuss further joint steps following the talks in Alaska.
Volodymyr Zelensky, we talked about a meeting in Alaska. We hope that the central topic at the meeting will be a ceasefire, an immediate ceasefire. The President of the United States of America has spoken about this repeatedly. He suggested to me that after the significant and important meeting in Alaska, we would definitely have direct contact and we would thoroughly discuss all the comprehensive results if there are any meaningful outcomes. And we will then determine our next crucial and mutually agreed upon steps forward.
Notably, Trump wants to arrange a meeting between Putin and Zelensky in a short time frame. The U.S. president said that this would be possible if the bilateral summit negotiations in Alaska on August 15th are successful.
Announcer, if the first one goes well, we'll quickly hold a second. I would like to do it almost immediately, and we will hold a quick second meeting between Putin, Zelensky, and myself, if they want to see me there.
By the way, Trump, Putin, and Zelensky could meet in Europe or the Middle East, according to The Guardian. According to unofficial information, a potential location for the meeting between Zelensky, Trump, and Putin was discussed during a video conference attended by the presidents of the US, Ukraine, and European leaders. However, experts express skepticism about the effectiveness of a meeting between Trump and Putin in Alaska, believing that it is unlikely to lead to any real agreements. Moreover, the results of negotiations between Trump and Putin will have no strategic impact on Ukraine. This opinion was expressed by Serhiy Sumleny, director of the Initiative Center European Resilience.
Serhiy Sumleny. Again, I think that nothing will happen. Well, because even if the meeting takes place, they'll just say, so we've agreed that Russia must get this and Ukraine must give up that. That's the kind of exchange. I get something, you give something up. That's our exchange. And well, Ukraine won't sign it. What happens next? Next, they'll say that the negotiation process has been disrupted. Maybe the United States, as Trump is threatening, will stop some intelligence sharing or something like that. But strategically, nothing really changes. Russia still can't capture what it wants, just as it couldn't before. The United States, which wasn't helping much before, will help even less now. Europe, which pretended it could decisively replace the United States, will keep up that appearance, gradually adding something to Ukraine. In reality, the only thing that could radically change the situation and shift the rules of the game is a decisive success by the Ukrainian army, let's say destroying certain Russian infrastructure targets, from the Crimean Bridge to some major Russian oil refineries. That could really make a difference, because it's important to understand that Russia is in a deep economic crisis. Their production is plummeting at a staggering rate. Even defense, well, not defense companies themselves, but those that produce raw materials for defense companies are putting people on a 4-day work week. They have enormous household debt, and the number of loans is huge. Of course, in this state of economic crisis, they can still keep going for months and months, but you can't keep rolling downhill forever. Eventually, you crash. That's why they need this pause. That's why they need at least 6 months to recover, to lift the sanctions, to catch their breath, so that obviously under these terms of the truce, Ukraine won't be allowed to strike, say, Russian energy infrastructure. They'll be able to restore all that, get exports back on track, and of course demand the lifting of some of the most painful sanctions for them, and so on and so forth.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
Trump wants to achieve peace in Ukraine and establish a strategic partnership with the Russian Federation. This was stated by Volodymyr Dubovik, director of the Center for International Studies and associate professor at the Department of International Relations at Odessa Mechnikov National University. The US president is ready to distance himself if negotiations with Russia do not yield results, the expert noted.
Yes, Trump really does want peace. He hasn't given up on this idea. And although at the same time he does indeed allow for the possibility that if nothing works out, America will step back and distance itself from these matters, and there will be its own format of relations with Ukraine and its own with Russia, towards which he is moving to improve relations and establish some kind of strategic or rather pragmatic partnership. I think that Putin, by the way, will emphasize this, and his Dmitriev Kirill, who conducts negotiations on his behalf, recently said that they want a constructive dialogue and will probably offer the Americans some new proposals again, perhaps for joint development of natural resources as well. But on the other hand, Trump also understands that if he moves too quickly toward Putin, he will once again face the criticism he has been hearing in recent months. Both Europeans and Ukrainians have been working very actively with the president to show that a pro-Russian stance like this is unbalanced, that it damages Trump's reputation, and that it makes him appear as a weak player. He doesn't want to allow that to happen, for things to be that way or for him to look like that. And that's why the methodical work of Europeans and Ukrainians in recent months has been effective for us. And Trump made this slight shift, as we've seen in recent weeks. But whether this slight shift was or will be a tactical move or actually a future policy, something more strategic and long-term for America, is still an open question. And so now we'll be watching again. Unfortunately, we've seen a return to these strange talking points about Ukraine being at fault, that the war started because of them, and so on, and that Zelensky is an obstacle, for example, when he says he can't change the constitution. We haven't heard that in a long time, so it's unpleasant. But during these past months, almost half a year of Trump's first presidency, we used to hear this. So we need to prepare for different scenarios. In particular, that will be blamed again because Russia keeps saying, as they do, we want peace, we want a ceasefire. But there are certain conditions under which one must agree to these terms. So this is a question for Ukraine if it doesn't want to sign such an agreement.
By the way, the US will likely offer Russia mineral extraction rights in Alaska in exchange for ending the war in Ukraine, according to the Daily Telegraph. According to the publication, Trump is preparing to offer Putin access to rare earth minerals in Alaska and a partial lifting of sanctions on the Russian aviation industry in exchange for ending the war in Ukraine. At the summit in Anchorage on August 15, 2025, US President Donald Trump plans to discuss these economic incentives with Putin, including access to the resources of the Bering Strait, which holds 13% of the world's oil reserves. The proposal is part of a broader strategy to reach a ceasefire agreement. In turn, the Allies are prepared to deploy peacekeeping forces in the event of a truce or to strengthen sanctions if the negotiations fail. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, opening the meeting of the Coalition of the Willing, said that the military plan for deploying deterrence forces is ready to be shared as soon as a ceasefire agreement is reached. The British Prime Minister noted that nothing is guaranteed from the meeting between Donald Trump and Putin on Friday. However, he said that the Coalition of the Willing is ready to deploy peacekeeping forces when the moment comes or to impose sanctions if necessary.
We have made real progress today. An important conversation with President Trump regarding security guarantees, as Emmanuel just mentioned. As we have already said, the coalition is stepping up, demonstrating its intentions, reliable military plans, and support from the United States. As a coalition, we are ready to support Friday's meeting and anything that may result from it. Of course, nothing is guaranteed. As Emmanuel and Friedrich said, the President has agreed to hold a briefing immediately afterwards so that we know the next steps. We are ready to support this, including the plans we have already developed for deploying support forces after the cessation of hostilities.
And what do you think about the Trump-Putin meeting in Alaska? We look forward to your comments. Stay tuned for more updates and don't forget to like the video. Wishing you peaceful skies above.